So, all of you, welcome to this session. Actually, I used to conduct a regular session on Saturday, but as I told you before, Rashad, like I was too busy in certain projects, so I was unable to conduct these sessions. But now I'm starting again every Saturday. I'm going to conduct these sessions. So this session is being recorded. So whoever is joining late for some reason, they can see the video later. I'm going to post this video on my YouTube channel. So I'm now starting my session, okay? So just confirm, Adnan, can you see my screen?
Yeah, exactly. I can see your presentation.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, so I'm starting now, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, now my short introduction. My name is Amir Ali Ansari and I'm CSCBI reporting, and I'm heading the data division of Treehouse Consultancy in UAE, Dubai. And I'm also running my blog easypowerbi.com, and I'm running a YouTube channel with the same name, Easy Power BI. So this session is basically related to a very important topic like data modeling pitfalls, because in most of the cases, people who are working on reports and dashboards, the first step is actually creating a data model for your reports. So what is happening in most of the cases, like in ideal situation, you have a very good data structure with you, you have good naming conventions, and things are fairly organized. So in that case, you are not worried about the problems you are going to face, because there will be very minimal problems, minimal issues if you are creating your data models. But once your data is not structured properly, so there are possibilities that you might face different issues. So this session is basically related to those issues which we usually face. And I'm sharing my experience because I've been facing these issues, and I've been seeing my colleagues, my team members stuck up in these kind of issues. So I thought that this is the best platform to share my experience. So coming back to the agenda, the major pitfalls I have classified into six major pitfalls. One is the insufficient data. Like whenever you are starting your data modeling for a project, if your data is not sufficient, definitely in that case, if you are depending on the out of the box relationship, or you can say the automatic relationship which the system uh, uh, do it by itself, in that case, there are always chances like you are not getting a correct data model. So because the system is depending on the available data you have, so what is happening, like whenever you are using that particular data for data modeling, the suggestion coming from the system itself, or Power BI itself for the data modeling, is not correct. So you have to be sure, like you know your data perfectly before importing that data into your data model, or importing those tables into your data model. So this is very important. Like if you are starting, you should have sufficient data which can reflect like exact nature of your tables. So if I'll give you a simple example over here, this is a sample data I'm going to present over here. This is the master customer record, in which you have three customers, and three customers have three different IDs, like ID1, ID2, and ID3. But in another table, we have a foreign key of customer ID, but there is a column name similar, which is for the entry ID. Here, this ID is being used as a customer ID, but in this table, this ID is used as a transaction ID. And this actual customer ID is actually foreign key, which is supposed to be related with this ID. So in this case, this data, although this is correct, but the way it is at this stage is not sending a right message to the system. Like you can see that it appears like this is a kind of a one-to-one relationship. Even if you connect this ID with the customer ID, In that case, once again, this is not going to present, or you can say create a correct model. So if I take you to the model diagram over here, you will see that after you import these tables into your system, this is a kind of a structure which is made automatically. So if you see over here, it has connected customer master with the customer transaction. Like here, it has automatically connected this ID with the transaction ID, which is not the correct one. Like we are supposed to connect this ID with the customer ID. So one thing which is very important, like at the time of transformation, you can rename these columns so this foreign key can match together. But even in that case, like if I delete this relationship over here and I do it manually, like I'm putting this ID and I'm connecting it with customer ID, once again, the relationship is one-to-one relationship. Why this is happening? Because your data is not complete right now. The way it is stored currently, it is not giving an impression of one to many. Like because you have only one transaction per customer, in that case, whatever data model is created, it is created like a one-to-one relationship. So imagine if you are importing your customer data and you are depending on the data modeling feature of Power BI. So first time once you import this data, so you cannot rely on this structure or this relationship because this is not giving you a correct picture. Adnan, can you see my diagram?
Yeah, I can see your diagram.
Okay. So this diagram is actually giving you a very clear picture, like your data model which was created is not perfect. And because of that, you will face issues when you move forward. What kind of issues you are going to face? Now, first of all, we'll just walk through all these problems, then we will come back to the actual example. Now, first we discussed like if you have insufficient data, like your data is not giving you like exact picture, like what your data is actually trying to tell. In that case, computer will understand that probably this is the right relationship which it is suggesting. So being the owner of that particular data, you should be 100% sure that like the relationship which is suggested by Microsoft Power BI is perfect. The another example is like improper column names. Like as you have seen over here, we have customer ID with the name ID and the customer ID over here is with the name customer ID. So in order to make this perfect, you should be having similar name of this foreign key. Like once you are transforming your data, you should keep the similar name. So at the time of importing that data or creating your data model, it should connect to the right column. Otherwise, you have to connect it manually to the correct column. So if you want Power BI to create relationship automatically and perfectly, then your naming convention of your column should be appropriate. So in order to avoid that, whenever you are importing your tables, try to make sure that your data or your column names are perfect, which will help create a relationship perfectly. Now, once you are depending on automatic relationship, like I've given you example over here, like whenever you are importing data, this relationship is created automatically. Imagine, because right now we are looking at a use case where we have only 3 tables. But imagine if you have a structure where you have around 20 or 30 models or 10, 20 or 30 tables. In that case, identifying the exact relationship is almost impossible. So in that case, what we usually do, we create copies of these models. Like in this case, what I'm doing, because in my case, I have customer master, and customer transactions. So in this case, I'm concentrating on only this part. Like over here, I have the product list available with me, but I'm not looking at the product list. It doesn't say that product list is absent. Actually, it is creating one more view of your data model. Coming back again, I suggest all of you please mute your mics because it's obstructing the session. Okay, coming back again. Now over here, if you see that because we have created another screen, so it is not actually creating another you can say new model, but actually it is just creating a separate view. And this view is just to bifurcate your actual model so you can concentrate on this part only. So whenever you have a very large data models, you can make multiple views and you can concentrate on that parts, and you can make sure that, okay, this relationship part or this segment is working perfectly. So here, another point which I want to discuss over here is like drag and drop mistakes. Now, once again, as I demonstrated over here, like you identified that this system is creating a kind of a wrong uh, relationship, and you want to correct that relationship and connect it with the right column. Now, I'm connecting ID with customer ID. So I'm happy that this connection is made, but I'm not giving importance to the type of relationship created over here. So this is a drag and drop mistake. Most of the time people do, like they are not checking like exactly what kind of relationship it is making. So you have to take care of it, like, because I know that this is a customer master and customer transaction, and this must be one-to-many relationship. So what I'll do, I'm going to change it to one-to-many, and I'll click OK. And now my diagram is giving me a correct picture, like your data model is connected correctly. And if I switch to second window, this is automatically updated. Like you don't have to change in separate window because the same model copy is visible in another window, another layout. And you are only concentrating on the customer part. So what I'm trying to explain over here, like whenever you are working on your reports, you have to avoid drag and drop mistakes. And because once you drag and drop and you see those highlighted columns, like, okay, these are connected perfectly, then you think that, okay, it's fine, no need to check any other thing. But if you are checking that symbol, or if you are ignoring these symbols, like if it is making a correct relationship or not, then definitely you are going to face problems. Another issue is the limited knowledge of selected data. Like what I have experienced, like whoever is working on Power BI report, and they are not the owner of that particular data. Sometimes you are working in your organization and different departments share different kind of databases with you, different kind of tables with you, and you don't spend time understanding those tables. That is why what is happening, like people jump and create data model based on their personal understanding, and sometimes that is actually not the proper case. Like whenever you create those data models without having proper knowledge of that particular data, you always there are chances that you might create wrong relationship. And in that case, definitely your reports, your numbers, your results, your calculated columns and measures will always give you wrong results. And it might be very difficult to identify those numbers, because sometimes, because you are not owner of that particular data. For example, after applying a certain column of measure, you are getting a figure of 23 million, and you are, because you are not the owner and you are not the business user, you cannot identify like that whether this 23 million is a correct figure or not. But if a person who is the owner of that particular data, he will immediately point out like it is impossible, that that figure cannot come. So going back and understanding that particular data structure or how those tables are connected together at that time after completing your project or after completing your report will be disastrous. So I suggest everyone, like if you are working on your data, sit with the data owner. If you are the owner of the data, definitely there is no issue. But if you are not the owner of your data, you have to sit with the person or that entity which is sharing that data with you. So in that case, you have to understand it properly so you can verify that those relationships which you are creating are accurate and it's not going to create any issue in future. The last and final pitfall, which I usually consider important, is like inability to read error messages. Like because in ideal situation, I'll just give you an example over here. Like here, I have the data source, and I'll refresh that particular data source, and it is going to update my data without any issue. And if you see my data model, like it is ideally connected and there is no issue. But as if I bring it back to that original form when it was automatically created and this was not one to many, but one to one relationship. And then I refresh this data. Once again, this refresh will be successful. But because at this particular stage, data is ideal and there is no issue with this data. But if I go to Excel and I add that particular entry in that particular record, that is going to create an error. Rishad, can you see my screen?
Yes,
The
I'm
Excel,
here. I can
Excel,
see.
Excel. Okay,
Yeah, Excel, yeah, with a table and another one.
okay, okay. Now over here, this is the same table which was imported. And here I'm going to add one more record, which is the ID number 4, the transaction number 4. And I'm making another transaction for customer number 3 for the month of March. And I'm using certain entries and I'm using certain records. And now I'm going to save it and I'll close it. Coming back to Power BI. Now I'm going to refresh this data again. Now you will notice that in this particular case, because I have a transaction table and I have added one more record in that transaction table, my data is not refreshing because my data model is now not correct because it's no more one-to-one relationship. So it is saying that column customer ID in table customer transactions contains a duplicate value 3 and it's not allowed for the column on the one side of a many-to-one relationship for the column that I use in the primary key table. So these kind of errors, if you are unable to read and understand, you will not be able to rectify those errors. So the point which I am explaining over here, like inability to read error messages, you might think that probably something happens and this data is not refreshing for some other reasons because of lack of knowledge of your data modeling and the data structure. You might not be able to fix this particular error because this error is actually related to the incorrect data model. And there are so many exceptions and so many messages coming. And once again, you are playing with a very small data model. So identifying this kind of error is very easy in this situation, but because sometimes your table structure or your data model is something like that, every table is dependent on another table. Like if once the primary table is loaded correctly, then the secondary tables will be loaded. So if something fails somewhere, it will be very difficult to identify. So I always suggest, like, if you are making correct data model and you are 100% sure like what your data is actually doing. So in this case, once you fix this particular issue, which should be one too many. Now, once I refresh it, you'll see that my refresh is successful and the data is now reflected over here. So when I go to my table and when I'll see that I have these 2 rows of 3 available over here. So in this case, this is an ideal situation. Like if you are doing proper data modeling and if you understand your data correctly, you will be able to create correct models. And if you are having lack of knowledge of your data and you are not understanding like what this data is telling, you might rely on the out of the box relationship created. Now over here, we have another table. If you see my report, I have the third table, which is the product table. Once again, this product table has a product ID, which is actually an ID column. So here we have these transaction data available over here. So if I'll create a blank report based on this particular data, and I'll create a simple table visual, and I'm creating like ID and product department, product categories, product and price. I'm taking all values together, and this is my transaction data. I'll just increase its size so it will be clearly visible. So you'll see that this data is like this. And if I create a kind of a report in which I'm adding certain slices over here, and I'm putting department in this slicer, and I'm creating a report over here. One more slicer I'm adding. And here I'm adding the product categories. Okay, now this has been created. Now what I'm doing, I'm creating a chart, a visual over here, the stack column chart, and I'm putting product categories in the axis, and I'm putting the price in the value. So I have this structure or this visual created in front of me. Now the problem with this is like we are using a flat table. So what we have to do in these kind of cases, like whenever we have a flat table, we have to create dimensions out of it. Now there are 2 ways of doing things. Like I'll go to the transformation screen. I'll share this screen with you. Adnan, can you verify that you're seeing this screen?
Yeah, this is a tabular, like I can see.
Yes. Okay, now over here, you'll see that this is the product list. And here in this product list, we are not having a kind of any dimension tables involved. It's a flat table which is having every information available over here. So you have two ways of creating dimension tables. Either you create duplicate or reference. So reference means it's not going to create a new source or new fresh connection, and duplicate is going to create another connection with the database. So best practice is reference, but for this example, I'm using duplicate just to show you. Now here we have, I'm creating one more duplicate. Here I'm renaming it to departments. And here I'm renaming it to product category. And what I'll do over here, I'll select department and I'll remove other columns. And here on the product category, I'm going to select and product categories, and I'm going to remove other columns. And once I'll close it, close and apply, you will see that just a second. Now you will see that in the data model, you have a couple of more relationship built, like the product categories. Department it has not created, but what we can do with that, like the same example I'm creating another layout. I'm creating like product list, departments, and product category. And I can build relationship over here. So what I'm trying to explain, like once again, because there is only one product category, so with the product list, you can have many products, so you can change it. But what I'm trying to explain over here, like you have to create dimension tables, and based on that, you can simply apply these dimensions in your reports. Like once you have this product category, so instead of picking your product categories from this table, you can have your product categories from the dimension table. So in this case, what will happen, like whenever you have product categories from this dimension table, if for certain reports those product categories are, some product categories are missing, like there are no transactions in that particular record, even then you are going to see those categories in your report. So you have to make sure, like whenever you are working on your data models, sometimes you have to create your own dimension out of those flat tables. Like over here, just as I mentioned, like in this case, we were not having dimension tables, but what we did, we created certain dimension tables, and based on that, we have now what we need to check over here. Like I'll explain it once again. I'm going back to the transformation of the data. Whenever you are creating or using this method to create a new dimension table, you have just noticed that it has not created the exact data model. The reason behind it is that, like whenever you are taking a kind of a duplicate, you have duplicate entries in your table. So you have to remove those duplicates over here. Like in departments, I have removed duplicates, and in product categories, I'll remove duplicates. So once those duplication is removed, what will happen, like once I'll go back, I'll close and I'll create those relationship again. Here, once I drag and drop department again, it's going to create the correct relationship. The same manner here, I'll delete it and I'll create relationship again. So this is how you are going to design your structure, and you will create it in correct manner, because as I said before, like you might not get the correct data model once you are working on your reports. So you have to make sure, like whenever you are working on data models, you are 100% sure like what you are doing and what your data is trying to explain. Go through that particular list once again, and I'll take your questions as well. Like first is the insufficient data. We have shown you like how this insufficient data is going to create problem with your report. This second is the improper column names, which create unnecessary connections between these two, and it can also give you wrong suggestions. Okay, so any question from your side, if anyone want to ask any question? So after this session, I'm going to upload this on my YouTube channel, Easy Power BI. So those who missed something and if they want to go back and recall what was discussed in this session, so I'm going to upload this on YouTube channel. So you can go and review the same session. So probably next week also, I'm planning to have one more session. So stay tuned, and thank you for attending, all of you.
Thank you, everyone.